Good afternoon and welcome to the Move Minneapolis webinar, How to Plan Multimodal Trips in the Twin Cities. My name is Catherine Windick. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an outreach specialist with Move Minneapolis, focusing on individual solutions. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today's agenda, we're going to do an introduction, an overview of some tools and resources for planning multimodal and sustainable trips, a panel discussion, and an audience Q&A. This webinar is being recorded, and all people who registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email, including the recording, as well as links to resources that we talk about during the webinar, and the slides from the webinar as well. You can use the Q&A to submit questions throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait until the end. So use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat. We do have closed captions enabled, so you can control that by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And when you leave the webinar, you'll be immediately redirected to a brief survey that we hope you'll complete to help us plan and improve future webinars. Before we get to the panel discussion, I would love for anyone who would like to put in the chat box, so this is the chat versus the Q&A, the chat box, what you would like to learn about today. So when we have the panel discussion, we can review some of those responses and hopefully be able to tailor our conversation to that a little bit. So please share. I'm going to just name our panelists today. I'm going to do full introductions of them later in the webinar, but so that you're excited to hear them talk, we've got Amity Foster, Telly Cadet, Chris Kulhanek, and Jordan Kocak. They are waiting in the wings for me to finish my overview and introduction, and then we'll get into a discussion. A little bit about Move Minneapolis. We are the transportation management organization for downtown Minneapolis. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to empower people to choose sustainable transportation options through educational opportunities and by reducing barriers, which we are hopefully working on today with this webinar. On the screen, there's an image of some people in a park with bikes and one person using American Sign Language. That was from a group ride last summer that was educational with Bike MN. And then there's an image of some people around a table at an indoor event where we were tabling at a neighborhood organization's annual meeting, providing sustainable transportation information. What we do: employer services, commuter resources and consultations, sustainable transportation education. So that's a lot of stuff to say. We help people figure out how to get around sustainably. That could include commuter fares, transportation benefits consultation, individualized trip planning, commuter surveys, events like Car Free MSP in September, Bike Week in May, and the Minneapolis Transportation Summit in the fall. We do webinars like this, lunch and learns, all sorts of different options. All of our services are free. If you are interested in working with Move Minneapolis, bringing us to your workplace or as an individual, contact me, Catherine at moveminneapolis.org, and we can figure out what would work for you. A brief note on today's topic. So we're going to be talking about planning trips, but we won't necessarily focus on how to pay for transit. If you do want more information about how to pay for transit, on the screen I have a thumbnail from a recent Move Minneapolis webinar, Commuting in a Hybrid World, where at 28 minutes and 53 seconds, I talk about how to pay for transit, so different options for that. And you can also visit the Metro Transit website, metrotransit.org/fares, which I have a screenshot on the screen of, to learn more about paying for transit. And now I'll get into an overview of some trip planning tools and resources. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I won't get in depth, but this will just give you kind of a taste of what options are available to you when you're trying to think about how to plan sustainable trips and you haven't done so before. I'll be touching on Google Maps, Metro Transit, Points, and Transit app. On the screen, I have logos for those 4 resources. And I want to note that none of these tools is perfect, and everyone has different preferences. So that's why we want to highlight a few different options that you can start trying out to see what works for you. And I hope that you can keep in mind to not be intimidated by all the options and all the things to learn, because once you start using whatever chosen technology or strategy you want, you'll learn what works for you, and you won't have to think about all of the options all of the time. So I'm going to start with Google Maps. And I wanted to start with this because many people already have familiarity with Google Maps because they might use it for driving directions when using a car. So because of that, there's a lower barrier to using Google Maps for planning other kinds of trips. That is because, you don't have to learn this new technology to just learn how to take transit or bike or walk or use shared mobility, micromobility. So Google Maps is great to start, and I'll talk about how you can use this to complement other resources as well. But they do have options for transit, biking, walking, and micromobility when those are in season. That is the shared bikes and scooters that you'll see on the street. And I do have a couple of caveats around using Google Maps. One is that the transit schedules are not necessarily up to date. So if you're using this to plan transit trips, keep that in mind. You would probably want to cross-check against Metro Transit to make sure that you know exactly when the bus is supposed to be coming. Also, for biking and walking, the directions might not always reflect real world conditions. So just keep that in mind. You're not necessarily sure which way Google is sending you, and it might not be the most bike-friendly route or the most walk-friendly route. So just keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to try to share my screen or to show you in real time here to talk about some features of Google Maps that can be helpful for transit and biking and walking. So as usual, if you use Google Maps for planning car trips, you use it the same way. Just put in your origin or your destination and click directions. And I'm going to go from the Move Minneapolis office to the food building in Northeast Minneapolis. So you can see at the top of the screen on the left, there are different time estimations for the different ways of getting around. We have car, transit, walking, and biking. And just to keep in mind that these are all estimates. This is based on a lot of different factors, so these might not be accurate. The driving directions don't take into account how long it takes you to pay for parking or to find parking or to walk from, where your car is to where your destination is. Transit, there could be delays that throw that number off. Walking, you could walk slower or faster than Google Maps thinks, and same for biking. So just keep those things in mind. There's a couple things that I'd like to point out for transit when you're using this to plan a trip. And again, I like to use Google Maps for like an initial, just exploratory, where would I catch the bus, or where would this take me? How many buses would it take me? And then I verify with Metro Transit or vice versa. So it'll show you the options. You have choices for leave now, depart at, arrive by, or last available. So if you need to leave at 12:09 p.m. today, this will be a good option for you. You can change that accordingly. And then if you click options, you can select whether you prefer bus or train. Subway and tram are not applicable in Minneapolis or St. Paul. And this might not be relevant if you are going somewhere that the train does not serve. But if you're going somewhere that's served by both bus and train and you have a preference for one or the other, this can be helpful to mark. You also have options for best route, fewer transfers, less walking, and wheelchair accessible. For the walking option, the options up here, there's not many of them, so that's maybe not as relevant. There's no leave by or depart at or arrive by options here, so you need to just do math. But this can be helpful to get just a sense of how long it might take to walk somewhere. If walking for transportation is not something you're used to, you might have no idea how long it takes you to walk a mile or 2 miles, and you might really over or underestimate how long that takes. So this can be good to get a kind of a ballpark of how long it might take you to walk somewhere when that's not your usual mode of transportation. It might be quicker than you think, could be longer than you think too. Again, keeping in mind that these are just estimates that Google puts out. And then for cycling, again, this will show you different options. There's not really anything under options that's helpful unless you want to put it in different distance units. But you have different options for different routes to get there. Something that's helpful in Google Maps is you can see compare the routes and how the elevation changes. So if you want to avoid hills, that's also available in the walking section. And then a couple other things about Google Maps that are helpful. If you go over to layers, you can select the biking layer, and that puts an overlay of different kinds of bike infrastructure on the map. So you can see for yourself what kinds of infrastructure is Google Maps directing you onto. So there's an overlay of all of the bike infrastructure here in green. And we have a legend with trails, dedicated lanes, bicycle-friendly roads, and dirt or unpaved trails. So this could be helpful for planning your own routes if you want to take it upon yourself to go from place to place. But it's just another way of learning more about biking in the cities. And then finally, another way to get even more information is if you just click on satellite and then zoom in as close as you can. This can be a really great way to learn about what the infrastructure actually looks like on a route that Google has suggested. So if you don't know what a trail is or what a dedicated lane is, you can look at it in the satellite view of the map and actually see, okay, it's telling me to take Hennepin. This is a sidewalk level separated bike path. These are usually very comfortable. People feel very safe on these. They're very low stress. So this is a great way to learn more about different route options and different infrastructure in the city when you're not really familiar with the area. You don't know what it looks like on the street there. You can also get kind of a taste of how much car traffic there might be on a street and how wide lanes are or not, what kinds of barriers there are between you and cars. Obviously, this is just a snapshot in time, so this does not reflect all of the time. But if there's a lot of cars in a spot, you might guess that there's usually a lot of cars in that spot. So you can kind of get more of a feel for how high traffic an area might be. Next, I'm going to switch to talking about Metro Transit, which has a lot of different options. I'll start with the trip planner, which is just at metrotransit.org. And this is pretty simple to use. You put in your from address, and I'm going to do the Move Minneapolis office. And then in the to field, you can type in the address that you're going to, if you know that, or it's possible that there might be a pre-populated name in the to field. So what I mean by that is if you start typing, there are some pre-populated names in here and locations. These are cultural centers like theaters, there's schools, there's healthcare facilities, and transit centers are pre-populated. So you can select that, choose to leave now or depart at, arrive by. If you do those things, you can change the time by either clicking these buttons or click on the number itself. And you can change it from AM to PM. You can also change the date. And this is important to keep in mind because schedules do change on weekends and holidays. So you don't want to assume that if you plan a trip for Tuesday, it's going to be the same schedule as on Saturday necessarily. We also have more options. So you can say how far you're willing to walk, what service type you'd like to use, and there's some additional options and a choice for accessible stops. Click on Plan My Trip, and it'll bring up 3 trips for you that you can choose. So it'll show them. If you click on them, it'll have details. You can zoom in on the map to see where you need to walk to get to the bus stop or the transit station and from your destination to the bus. It tells you the fare over here, and it also lists stop numbers, which will be helpful. I'll mention that a little bit more about that later. So you have a bunch of different options, and you can choose what might work best for you. If you know your route, so let's say you know that you're taking the 17, you can find the schedule by route by just putting it in that box there. And you select the direction, select what day of the week you're looking at, and it'll give you the schedule as it's available printed. So these are at bus stops, and these are also available as pocket schedules that you can get at events, or Move Minneapolis can give those to you from our office, or Metro Transit can provide those as well. So this is one way of finding out when to catch the bus, but this is specific to specific stations. So if you don't use this one stop, you'll have to estimate the time that the bus will come according to just this schedule. Going back to the trip planner, on the same page, just metrotransit.org, in the middle of the page, there's Next Trip. And this features real-time departures, either by route or by stop number. So again, if you know your route, you can select it and the direction and which stop you board. And it'll tell you at that stop when the next buses are coming. You can expand it. And this can be helpful if you are waiting to see when should I leave my office, when should I leave my house to get to the bus stop on time. You can also click Show My Bus, and that will show you, based on GPS, where the buses actually are on the street. You can do by stop number, and this can be really handy if you do know your stop number. Like I said, it can be found on that schedule when I did the trip planner, we saw it there. It's also available in Google Maps. But this will tell you all buses that are going to that specific station and when they're coming. So this is helpful if you can catch any one of a number of buses that come by. If they all go to the same place, you could see all of them instead of just searching for a line and then all separately searching for 74. So this can be really helpful. Again, the stop number is listed here, so that can be helpful to make a note of for frequently used stops. And now I'm going to just switch back to my PowerPoint. So the things that I've talked about so far are just using internet. And what if you don't have or don't want to use internet? Let's say you're out in the world, you're out of data, or your phone, you're running low or you don't want to use it. There is an option. Metro Transit has several options to not use data. One is Next Trip. I already talked about Next Trip on the browser, but you can also text for Next Trip. So there's an image on the screen of a phone that someone has used this feature for. So you text the stop number to a phone number, and it will respond back what the next trips are that are coming to that specific station. So this is a bus stop, and the Next Trip information is at the bottom of the bus stop. It has the stop number 53134, and it has instructions. It says text MT 53134 to 27299. And I will note that 27299 is an out-of-date number. The updated Next Trip number is 50934. So some signs around town might still have the old number. If you happen to text that number, it will let you know that you should text 50934. So it's not a big deal, but it could be helpful to just put 50934 in your phone for future reference. BRT stations also include this information. Even though there's a lot more information, it might be a little harder to see, but they do have the Next Trip info of how to contact them to get that text so you don't have to use data. If you would like to speak with a human, you can call Metro Transit 612-373-3333. You can speak with a transit expert about routes, schedules, and fares. They're open Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturdays 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Closed on Sundays and holidays. So this is great if you have a lot of questions that you're not getting answered by other resources, or you just want to talk it through with someone to make sure you're doing the right thing. You can also text for transit information to 612-444-1161. That's available whenever the Transit Information Center is open, as I noted just previously. And you can also chat. So if you're on metrotransit.org, same information, Transit Information Center hours as well, if you prefer to talk with someone via chat. So there's a lot of different options and ways to interact with Metro Transit to get answers to the questions you have. So you can feel really confident when you're taking that first transit trip. Now I'll switch gears now to an app called the Transit app. So this is only an app that goes on your smartphone, and you can download it from the App Store or Google Play. They feature transit, bike, and micromobility information, which again, micromobility is the shared bikes and scooters that you see in the summer and spring. When those are available, that information is in this app. So this is another way to plan trips and get information about transit. There are rider alerts that you can get notifications to your phone. You can follow along as you're riding on the bus, and it can actually notify you when to get off. You can pin locations and save your favorite transit lines. And it's a really neat user interface that you might really take to. So I recommend playing around with transit, download it. It's free to download and see where it can take you. And then last, I wanted to highlight the Points app. So this is for biking specifically. And on the screen, I have two smartphone images, one of a bike map and one of some smiley faces. It's a bike infrastructure. Points is an interesting app because it highlights amenities and hazards for biking. So amenities such as drinking fountains, fix-it stations, and hazards like potholes or icy trails. It also highlights the comfort levels of different routes. So this is really great for beginner bikers who don't know how to figure out which route is safe or comfortable. This will actually do it for you. So you can slide the indicator to whether you want it safer or more flexible or faster. So this is a really great resource to try out, especially if you're new to biking in the city. And that will lead us to our panel discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I'll invite our panel to come on screen. Welcome, everybody. All right, and now I'm going to introduce our panelists. And first, I'd like to note that the panel discussion in this webinar highlights individual experiences and opinions and may not necessarily reflect everyone's experience. So just keep that in mind as we're talking. These are everybody's individual experiences. And Move Minneapolis would like to emphasize that there's no one way or single resource to plan a trip. So we promote multiple resources and perspectives, hoping that you will take what you can from it and apply it to your own circumstances. We're also available to help plan trips individually beyond this webinar. Stay tuned until the end to find out about our customized consultation program. So today we are excited and privileged to be joined by our excellent panel. Amity Foster lives in Northeast Minneapolis and has been taking public transit across the metro for 20 years. Her favorite bus is the 11, and her experiences on our transit system are what move her to organize for the best one we should have. Telly Cadet has recently become passionate about everything regarding transit. Telly is currently both an employee and student at the U of M. Aside from advocating for better transportation, Telly enjoys practicing and coaching Muay Thai. Chris Kulhanek has been bicycle commuting in the Twin Cities for more than 15 years and has been a year-round bike commuter since 2018. She currently works in a windowless biology lab at Minneapolis College, and she gets her sunshine and podcast fix on her 11-mile round-trip bike commute. Jordan Kocak, AICP, is a transportation planner and the pedestrian bicycle coordinator for Hennepin County. Jordan's work involves the study, planning, and design of pedestrian, bicycle, and roadway infrastructure, with an emphasis on creating safe and comfortable facilities and roadway crossings for everyone, and developing programming to encourage county staff and residents to incorporate walking and biking in their daily lives. So welcome and thank you again to our panel. And the first question that I have for you all is, how do you usually get around and why? And I'm going to start with Amity. You could respond.
Sure. Hi, all. I'm Amity. My pronouns are she, her. So I am pretty reliant on the bus. The 11 is the one that stops right in front of my house almost. So it's always my starting point. And then it's either transferring to other buses or the train. I got a cargo bike last year, so I'm starting to bring that into my transportation options, I guess, and am probably going to start to shift more into that because I can just get a lot more places with exercise built right in. My husband also has an EV car share membership, so we've started to use that a little bit more for like vet appointments, things where we need more opportunities. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Before I move on, I wanted to note it looks like chatting is disabled for attendees. So if people want to respond what you're hoping to learn in the Q&A function, feel free to do that. Otherwise, we'll just keep on going as we have been. All right, so next for the question, how you usually get around and why, I'll call on Telly.
Yeah, I usually take the train. So because of my situation living downtown and working close to downtown, for the most part, the train has been the most reliable way to get around. So it's the one that I use the most. But the benefit of being downtown too, for me, has been having several buses that take you pretty much the same places. So things like the 3 bus is something that I use a lot to get on campus when the train is not as available. And during the summers and springs, I usually use my motorcycle for transportation when it was working. So I plan on getting back into that too.
Great. Thanks, Telly. Chris, how about you? How do you get around and why?
I mostly get around by bicycle, and it's because it calms me down. And I work in a windowless lab, so I don't see the sun otherwise. I do take buses when the weather is terrible, but mostly I have studded tires, so I try to do biking year round.
Great, thanks. And Jordan, how about you? Why? How do you get around and why?
Yeah, it really is a mix and depends on what the trip is. So when my wife and I were looking for a place to live, we deliberately picked a neighborhood where we could walk for a lot of our daily trips, like groceries and other sort of everyday errands and needs. So a lot of those daily need type trips we do by walking or maybe biking. I also have a cargo bike, and I use it most days to bring my daughter to daycare, as long as there's not snow and ice on the road. So biking for that. And then most of the time when I'm commuting, it is biking. I live in Northeast Minneapolis, and I work in downtown Minneapolis. So about 4 miles, 20-25 minutes each way on the bike trip. And then I would say I use transit kind of as a supplement, as some other people noted, like if it's really cold or icy out, I'll use transit. I also, maybe I'll say a little bit more about this in a further question, but like if my bike breaks down, it's a great backup to have transit available. And so I always carry my Metro card with me.
Great, thanks everyone. And I'll note, I saw in the Q&A that someone from Metro Transit noted that you no longer need to use the MT in front of the stop number for next trip. So you just use the stop number and text it to that number, and then it'll be good to go. So thanks for sharing that. All right, so next I'd like to talk about what tools or strategies you usually use to plan multimodal or sustainable trips. So this could be just, you're just taking transit, you're planning a transit trip, or maybe you're combining modes, you're biking to the bus, or taking the bus and the train. I guess that's typically or technically multimodal, but they could be things that I've talked about or things I have not talked about, tools, strategies that you usually use when you're planning a trip to somewhere you have not been before. Maybe Chris, I'll start with you.
I usually just go to Google Maps. I just start there. And most often I do like to compare how long it would take on the bus versus biking, just because it justifies the time spent somehow. So I will usually start with Google Maps, check the terrain, check to see if I've done it before, because most recently I just switched my phone service and I no longer get good cell service. So I have to make sure that I take pictures, because I just found this out today preparing for this. You can't save maps on an iPhone as you can on Android via Google Maps. So that's a downfall for me personally. So I screenshot things. So I start with Google Maps, and there's a lot more I could say, but I'll stop there.
Great, thanks. Telly, how about you? What tools or strategies do you usually use?
So for me, because I do live downtown, there's a lot of bus services that exist outside of just Metro Transit. So one that I use pretty regularly is the Metro Valley Transit Authority express buses, because they all 9 out of 10 go through downtown and through the University of Minnesota. So it's pretty convenient for me. And I've actually found through that the app that I use the most is the Ride MBTA app, just because the accuracy in terms of when the train or the buses will be there is a lot better than, say, Apple Maps. Not as good as getting it straight from the Metro Transit trip planner or the website, but user-friendly enough to where if it's 10-15 minutes before my time to leave, I can look at my favorite stations or favorite buses and see which one is going to be closer around the time that I need to go. I'm not good at planning. I don't usually plan, and I really go with the whim. So it's been the most helpful for me. And the cool thing about that app too is that it does give you as close to real time images of where all the buses and trains are. So that also helps me in an intuitive way to know like where I should be going or what options I have available for me.
Great, thank you. Amity, how about you?
Sure. So I use a combination of Google Maps, then also the Metro Transit website, and I will usually just go straight to the schedule. If it's a route that I ride often, like just to see when it's going to be there, and then I can figure out how I'm a slow walker. So it's like, how long do I need to leave to actually get to the bus? I'm more type A than I want to be. So I really like to have things planned out very well. So then I'll also go to Google Maps and then check the trip on Metro Transit's website, because every now and then one will say there's no transit available, and the other will say there is, and it can depend on the time that you put in, or even the stop, or like how much do I want to walk. So it's sort of like you have to learn to game the system by experimenting and trying a bunch of different things. So my type A works well with that, I guess.
Great, thanks. Jordan, how about you?
A lot of similar comments to what's been said. Particularly, I kind of agree with Amity what she said on how she plans, but maybe one extra that I'll add is particularly if you're biking and you're looking at like Google Maps, let's say, to try to figure out a route. The way that you bike isn't necessarily going to be the same way that you would drive or that a bus would travel. So that's one thing that if you're maybe new to biking or walking, maybe takes a little adjustment, that you might be looking at different streets and different pathways than you would if you were driving. And Google Maps does have a feature that you can turn on that shows you its like preferred bike routes. It does a decent job of telling you where the bike lanes are and what streets are kind of bike comfortable streets, but it's not perfect, so you need to use your own judgment as well. And then Hennepin County, who I work for, we also have an interactive bike map that I will use sometimes ahead of time when I'm planning a route or a trip, because it has pretty detailed on-street versus off-street bike facilities. So it's just another tool to help figure out what might be the best way, particularly if I'm trying to stay mostly on trail or mostly on like low stress type roadways for biking.
Great, thank you. So I think a couple of you already said a couple of these things, but I'd like to open it up to if there are more. What tips, tricks, warnings, exciting things that you can share about how you plan trips, what about the tools you use for planning or taking sustainable trips in general. So this could be about, again, like how do you know how long it takes you to walk to the stop, and how about planning return trips and things like that. So any tips, tricks, warnings, exciting things that you didn't know when you first started using these ways of getting around. Amity, go for it.
Sure. So I am terrible at north, south, east, west. It's like not how my brain processes directions. So I will use Street View on Google Maps to see where the bus stop actually is to make sure I'm at the right one at the right time. And I learned this year from someone at Metro Transit after I tweeted about it. The street that is first on the stop intersections, so like if it's First Avenue North and First Street, the bus stop will be at like on First Avenue North. So this is important for the 6 downtown, right by the Starbucks and the Federal Reserve. The 6 comes from Northeast, but it also comes from the other direction, and it's 2 different stops going in the same direction. And the number of times I stood there and watched the 6 go by me, it's like, oh, and I finally had to ask, and they were like, yeah, it's the first street listed that has that shelter on it. So learn from my lesson. There you go. There's my tip. Or one of them. I have more, but other people.
Great. Yeah, Chris.
I really like the turn-by-turn directions when I have appropriate cell service. I find that to be totally awesome to be able to have one earbud in, listen to music, and have Google just tell me which way to go. Though I do make sure that I check the routes, like because I bike all the time. I know, oh, I'm supposed to turn here, I'm supposed to turn there. And sometimes I know my cell service is bad if I miss a turn. So that the turn-by-turn directions have saved me. Plus, if you get lost and you just want to just like get in the bike route, as long as you know you have cell service, it will be like, oh, rerouting, and it'll tell you a new way. I really like the turn-by-turn.
Great. Jordan?
Few things for me on bike commuting that I think make it a lot easier. One is if you're doing a regular bike commute and you have a setup, you can carry like a repair kit or tools with you in case you have a flat tire or something. But what I've found to be easier for me, particularly if you're in Minneapolis where there's really good and dense transit service, is I just use the bus as my backup, and you can put your bike on the rack, or you can even lock it to a pole and come back and get it later. And that just kind of like alleviates some stress. Like you don't have to worry about, oh no, it's like raining and I have to try to change a flat tire under a tree or something. You can just kind of like know that you're probably going to be able to get on a bus. And that might take a little ahead knowledge of like what bus routes intersect with your regular bike route. But that's one thing that has helped me not be too stressed out about like mechanical issues or breakdowns when I'm biking. And then another is, and this is going to be different for everyone, and this is more work commuting based, but if you have a place at your work where you can store things like a change of clothes, work shoes, other like things to freshen up when you get there, I think that can also really help. So again, then you don't have to be so concerned of if you like get wet or sweaty on your way to work, because you know you have that backup there if you need it. And so I found that to be helpful in my experience, if you're able to. And I know not everyone has that situation where they could store something like that.
Great, thank you. Telly, do you have other tips, tricks, warnings, exciting things?
Yeah, big warning that I found throughout my experience living downtown and having to interact with the green and blue line specifically is in mornings and on weekends specifically. It seems like when there is a technical issue, there is a delay for when someone can notify you about it. And that seems to happen a lot more consistently during those non-business hours. So honestly, during those times, if you have a scheduled train and you look up at the sign and it says it was supposed to come at 5:15, it's 5:16, it's still not there. Generally speaking, it's probably better for you to just try and take a bus or whatever other mode that you have. Like actually 2 days ago, I just learned that because I sat and waited for the green line at the Target Field Center for about an hour at 5 a.m. And yeah, I realized that, but now that I know that, of course, those people, same for everyone, they're not as staffed during off days or off business hours. So keep that in mind. And you might not get the notifications or any alerts about it either through the app or through the website or through the intercom until maybe much after.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And Amity, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, on Twitter, there's the MT_MN_alerts, which is the Metro Transit Alerts Twitter account. And I follow that for updates. And it's usually pretty good. I don't know how it's maintained, but I've gotten good tips from that. I wanted to answer Amy's question in the Q&A. How do you handle the possibility of running late? Because multimodalism, it is unpredictable. So I will usually text, like most of my people that I'm meeting with or coworkers, they know I take transit, and I will I'll text them and let them know like, hey, I'm gonna be late, the bus is late. Or sometimes, hope none of them are on this call, sometimes I will leave the house late and then I'll text them and be like, the bus is running late, sorry. So there's a pro to transit, but I'll just let people know, or I'll try to leave, depending on the meeting, I'll try to leave ahead of time so that I get there ahead of time a little bit, and then I'll just try to find a coffee shop or somewhere to hang out while I'm waiting. Or
I think
the library.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's where having friends who also take transit or bike or walk is really helpful, because they totally get it. And maybe they'll text you and they'll say, I'm running. I had a case where one time both of us text each other, said, my bus is late. And they're like, me too. So it's fine. So we're going to make it. It's going to be fine. So I think that communication is really key to let people know what your situation is. And hopefully they'll be understanding about that. Jordan.
If I could just weigh in on the predictability as well, more from walking and biking perspective, bikes can get flat tires and you can have other mechanical issues, but in my experience, walking and biking are some of the most reliable modes of travel because, and it kind of depends where you're going, but you almost never get caught in any sort of traffic jams or things like that. And so probably the biggest preventative is you can buy tires, and there's certain tire and wheel setups that are much less susceptible to get flat tires than others. So you know, if you can prevent and mitigate that, that's probably the biggest bike issue that's going to cause you to be late. And there are some things you can do to kind of mitigate that potential impact. So not saying that it doesn't happen and can't happen, but in my experience, it's been one of the most reliable. Like, I know it's pretty much always going to take me the same amount of time to get to work, no matter if it's a crappy weather day, there's traffic jams, whatever. It's usually quite reliable.
Definitely. I think, you know, not that flats don't happen and that they're not really hard to deal with necessarily, but I think people might overweight how often they happen or how likely they are to happen. So that could be seen as a barrier where, again, if it happens, it's a big deal. But the likelihood of it happening, there are things you can do to mitigate that. And as you mentioned, Jordan, so I think that's a really good thing to note. And I had something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. So yes, wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that. And then my last prepared question for you all is, what one thing would you want someone to know who is new to planning or taking trips via biking, walking, transit, or a combination of all of those modes? The one thing I will call on someone. Chris, do you have one thing? Someone's new to this, they don't know what they're doing. One thing.
So it's more than one sentence, but it is one thing. It's a quote. So start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So people always get worried about being perfect and thinking of all the possible reasons that you shouldn't do it or things will go wrong, myself included, as an anxious person. So just try it. That's my one thing, just try.
Great. How about you, Telly? One thing you would share with someone who's new to all this?
If you have never ever taken a bus or train, try taking it before you have to go somewhere to get the experience. I think it's really big. So you get used to the experience without having to worry about whether you're going to be there on time or if you get lost. And then potentially, if it is something that's available to you, have someone who maybe has a car or another mode of transportation that you can use just in case you get lost. That gives you an opportunity to learn and not be stressed during, which makes figuring out how to get on the train or the bus enjoyable and not as stressful.
Great. Jordan, one thing you would share?
Yeah, I think a big one, I agree with some of the things that have been said. I think one thing I would add is setting the right expectation for yourself. Like, if you want to start using the bus or start walking or biking and you mostly have been driving, it is going to be a different experience. The time it takes might be different, or your level of preparation might be different. And that's not saying it's better or worse one way or another, but you might need to develop a new routine for yourself, set a different expectation of how much time it's going to take or what you need to bring with you. And so I think just coming with that mindset can help you not get frustrated or feel like oh, it wasn't worth it to try this new thing. So yeah, so it's all about expectations and creating new habits around new modes of travel.
All right, Amity, one thing.
Yeah, this kind of goes along with that. Don't be shy or embarrassed about asking questions. Like, transit is not intuitive at all. And ask all the questions to everybody you can, because you're doing a new thing. Like, if you get on the 4P and the 4L, go different routes. You would think it's the 4 to go the same place. No, it does not. I've ridden transit for more than 20 years. That happened to me 2 years ago. Yeah.
It's happened to me too.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
If you get totally turned around, you can talk to people. They're really nice. That's a second thing, but people are pretty nice.
I can attest to that. I think people think I know where I'm going. So I get asked for directions a lot of times, and I do my best to help them. But just last week, I was waiting at a light rail platform, and someone came up and they said, "Do you know what rapid transit runs down Chicago Avenue and where I should get off the train to get to that?" And I was like, "Well, let me share with you." And I was really excited to help her, and she was excited that I was excited to help her. So lots of times people are open and willing to share their knowledge with you and figure things out. So I would second that as well. All right, so those are my prepared questions. So we'll go to the Q&A. So we've already answered one of them about planning for the unpredictability of using other modes, running late, things like that. I'll just note that someone had a suggestion for personal contacts. They share their locations through Google Maps. Under profile settings, you can find location sharing. So that is something I don't have experience with, but that's good to know. And then we had a question about travel tips for people who use wheelchairs or movement accommodations. And if any of you can speak to any of that, I know that none of us in this conversation right now use wheelchairs. So we won't necessarily be able to speak to that with our personal lived experience. But if you have any things that you've noticed around ADA compliance and making it easier, ways that it's easier for people to get around that can't use traditional transportation methods. So anything that you could share on that you know about, that you've seen, that you've experienced, or that you know that others have experienced in your lives. And I won't call on anyone because I don't know who has an answer. So Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just share one thing from a Hennepin County perspective, which is that recently we've started on all of our roadway repaving projects. Now we're reconstructing all those curb ramps to make them ADA compliant. And for all of our road reconstruction projects, we do as well. And that one's maybe a little more obvious that we would do it for those. So I guess as an institution at the county, we're trying to broaden the instances when we make the curb ramps ADA compliant to be more in line with the federal law and to achieve our county goals. Ultimately, we want all of the curb ramps on our whole county road network to be ADA compliant, but it's a long list. It takes a lot of money. And so this is one avenue we found to try to take advantage of opportunities where we're already in a community. We're already kind of disturbing the roadway, if you will, by doing a repaving or reconstruction project and making sure that everything gets to be compliant with that. And then just the last thing I'll say from a county institution standpoint, people can call us and basically let us know if things aren't compliant, and we do our best to find even an interim fix. And people can also file grievances with us for not being in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. So if there are truly egregious areas, or it's like, a person with a disability needs to use something in their daily life and it's just not compliant for them, there are paths that they can take to compel us to accommodate them. So.
Thank you for sharing. Telly.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that too, aside from resources that's directly provided through either the state or county in this case, I think what I found was there has been a lot of resources available locally within my community. I personally participated in one of the neighbors associations downtown, and aside from the resources available that's directly through Metro Transit, there's plenty of resources within your community that can help you with some of those transportation needs. So for example, the University of Minnesota has a lot of independent buses that focus on helping people with disabilities or need wheelchair access, and they will pretty much meet you where you are. And I know I'll have to look into it, but I know downtown Minneapolis has some kind of carpool system around that. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check, but your community is also a really good pool for that. And they would also be a really good pool for advocating getting some of those streets redesigned to be ADA compliant. I know the DMNA did some work with that too, within either last year or the year before. So aside from just relying directly with the Metro Transit, find what resources are available to your community, and they can also be one of your best advocates for getting some of those changes implemented.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts on that question? All right. Oh, Amity?
No, I think those are all good. The one, like, my answer to that is like the more, like, from what I've seen on buses and trains, there's spots on the buses and trains for folks in wheelchairs who need to use them, for people who have other mobility assisted devices. There's always the spots. Sometimes, like, just legit, sometimes people don't get up if they see you coming on. And I would say, like, if you're a person who takes transit and you're sitting up there, like, get up and move to another seat. Or if someone in a wheelchair is getting on the bus and there's someone sitting right there, like, be part of the, hey, be part of the community and say, hey, here's a spot. If you can move over here, so someone in a wheelchair can get tied down, or sorry, get their chair tied down. It's like, we're all riders supporting each other in this big thing, and it helps to sort of stick up or be a voice if other people aren't responding. There's also Metro Mobility. I honestly have heard both great things about it and not great things about it, but it is a service that is provided.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that, mentioning that, and all the other kind of thoughts on that. Appreciate that. We had a question that someone asked about planning trips that may involve multiple modes in one trip. And I think we talked about this a tiny bit, but for example, biking part of a route and taking a bus or train for the rest of the route. Are there tools that can help plan this kind of trip? And someone did respond in the chat of that Google Maps has a feature called mixed modes under options for transit directions that lets you combine biking, driving, or rideshare services with transit. The original poster said that they've used that, or they've found that that option normally takes longer than just biking the whole thing. So any thoughts around that? Either Google Maps mixed modes, if you've used that, or other ways that you plan combining different modes in one trip? And I know, I think Jordan, you mentioned that you can put your bike on the bus, you can put your bike on the train. I'll confirm that all buses and trains have racks for bikes. If the bus pulls up and the 2 slots for the bikes are filled, you can ask the driver if you can bring your bike on inside of the bus. It's up to the driver's discretion. So that might not work out. You might have to wait for the next bus if you need to bring your bike with you, but that is an option. So, you can ask, and it'll be up to them depending on how crowded the bus is and whatever judgment they make. But other thoughts about combining modes? Also, bikes ride for free. There's no separate fare for your bike, just in case anyone didn't know that.
I have taken the bus, or I guess it was a train. It was a long time ago, and then taken my bicycle on the train, and then biked to St. Joe from there. So that's an option. It's not exactly a perfect option, but if you wanted to see the world, see more of Minnesota, you can take trains with your bike. I know that. I've done it.
Yeah, I think I would. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, even if you're, like, let's say you have to transfer bus lines or train to bus, it's really not preferred, and it is kind of hard to do. And so I think, it's kind of the same from a multimodal perspective. It does take some maybe planning ahead, and maybe you're not always going to get it right the first time. And so I think, things aren't always going to like link together perfectly. And so I guess I'll go back to my thing about expectations of just, especially if you're trying it for the first time, it might take a couple tries to really figure out what the right approach or right amount of time you need to give yourself to be successful.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And one thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know if this exactly fits here, but thinking about the return trip, especially if you have transfers, because when you go somewhere, the frequency of the first bus you take and the frequency of the second bus you take might be different. And so you might have a really smooth, quick trip to go to a place because the frequency just lined up right, or it's a more high frequency, whatever the case may be. But then the return trip, it might not work like that. So you do want to do the return directions as well, and not just assume that it will necessarily go as quick if you're doing a transfer, or that could apply to, or if you're biking to a bus stop. Maybe you just leave your event with your bike and you just assume that the bus is going to be there, but maybe that's a lower frequency bus and you didn't think about that on the way there. So just keeping that in mind, that planning out the whole trip, if you like to plan and you don't want to wait around, that could be important. We've got a good question about how to find the closest bike rack to your destination. Does it show in Google Maps? I think this might be something that the Points app incorporates. I don't have a lot of experience with the Points app, but I think that is a feature that they are trying to implement in that app. But I don't think Google Maps shows up. I mean, you could do a satellite view and zoom in and see if there's bike parking there, or do street view. That is not necessarily going to be accurate. Those parking facilities might have been taken out since that picture was taken. But you could do that and get kind of a sense of it. Anyone have any other ideas? I know that there used to be, the nice ride stations. Well, they have the nice ride stations, the former nice ride stations that the city is implementing around the downtown and other areas of downtown and the city. But as far as I know, there's no bike parking map that exists. Anyone else? Yeah, so it'll be trial and error for that as well, I think. So we've got 2 minutes left. So I would love to wrap up and share my screen again real quick for the last couple minutes here. Here we go. We got audience Q&A. Great. So thank you again to our panel. I really appreciate all of you being here and having this conversation with us. Hopefully folks have gotten some good information from this webinar, had some questions answered, maybe thought of new questions. And so I wanted to let you all know about the customized consultations program from Move Minneapolis. This is available to those who live or work downtown and are interested in trying this out. So if you attended this webinar, but you're still not sure, you still have questions, you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't know how to find the best routes, you don't know which app to try using, first, you can go to moveminneapolis.org/customized-consultations, and you can fill out an intake form that basically just says what you're interested in learning more about. You can schedule a 15-minute consultation with the Move Minneapolis staff member virtually to talk through your specific situation, where you're going, where you're coming from, what you're comfortable with, all of those things. So check that out if you're interested in learning more about actually doing this and getting a little bit more guidance. I'd love for you to all save the date for Bike Week coming up the 3rd week in May. Move Minneapolis will be holding a celebration at Commons Park in downtown Minneapolis on May 16th. So watch our socials and our newsletter and all of those things for more details to be announced. Stay connected with us, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on all the things, and we hope that you'll come back for our next webinar. Let us know again in that survey when you finish that. When we leave this, please complete the survey and help us put on better and more webinars in the future. Thank you again so much for joining us, for paying attention. Thank you to the panelists, and have a wonderful day.